Hey, good morning and welcome to Open Mics with Dr. Stites. It's Wednesday, December the 14th. I'm Dr. Steve Stites, Chief Medical Officer here at the University of Kansas Health System, and we came dressed appropriately for Christmas today. Pretty good look, I think. Hey, it's been nearly 6 months since the University of Kansas Cancer Center achieved comprehensive status, one of only 53 in the country to achieve that elite designation. A lot has happened, including more funding for cancer trials to keep patients closer to home, as well as a vision for a new research and clinical building. This morning, we share a 6-month checkup. Joining us here in the Dolph Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio is Dr. Roy Jensen, Vice Chancellor and Director at the University of Kansas Cancer Center. Welcome back, sir. And Dr. Ronald Chen, Chair of Radiation Oncology. Welcome back, sir.
Hello.
And joining us remotely is Cheryl Jernigan, Pivot member and cancer survivor. We're going to explain. Good morning, Ms. Jernigan. I love the red. That's perfect. You got the Christmas theme going. I like that. We're going to explain the vital role of Pivot in cancer research. Dr. Dana Hawkinson, Hawkeye, will check in with our COVID count, plus a look at flu and RSV cases, and a little bit of stuff, what's going on in the news in the world of COVID. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Questions from our viewers are an important and critical part of this program. We want to hear from you. Get yours sent in to us now on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and the Medical News Network. You find those links right here on your screen. Jessica Lovell will join us a little later with those questions. Dr. Jensen, welcome back, sir.
Good to be here.
Always a pleasure. Now, Roy and I go back approximately a very long time, so I can't tell what it means to me to have you here in the studio with us, express my appreciation for all the great work you've ever done here at KU. I mean, it's amazing, and this whole comprehensive cancer thing is just remarkable. It puts us in the same league as some of the things people roll off people's tongue, like Sloan Kettering or Anderson or whatever. It means patients we care for by the world's leading cancer experts right here who have access to the most advanced clinical trials right here. Talk to us a little bit about the research we're doing and what this means and kind of what it means to you, because you've been on this journey now.
Sure. Well, it's really been a team effort. And, one of the funnest things that we got to do once we were designated was to have the party out at Children's Mercy Park. And that was fun. And we really got to have everybody out there and celebrate an achievement that had been almost 20 years in the making. And so that was a lot of fun. But the work is not done, and we always viewed getting comprehensive status as kind of a bit of a rest stop, maybe a water break, But we were right back to work, and we are planning for moving forward with our cancer program. We have a lot of strategic planning initiatives going on, including trying to understand what we can do to build a signature cancer building on the medical center campus, and that's going to occupy a lot of our time over the next few months.
It is going to occupy a lot of time, especially for you, young man and good sir.
Yes.
So I'll tell you, and as a patient in the cancer center here, someone who benefits from the great work that this program's done, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that this is right here in our hometown. So, hey, we put up a QR code with a link to all the information you're going to need about our Cancer Center clinical trials. Take a look at that, especially if you're interested in participating, because that participation helps drive new answers. And Dr. Chen, you're at the center of a lot of that research. So thank you for joining us today. Thanks. Chair of Radiation Oncology does an amazing job. Some minority and ethnic groups are far more likely to develop cancer, be diagnosed with cancer at a later stage when it is less treatable. Focusing on those at-risk groups is a hallmark of comprehensive cancer centers. Dr. Chen, talk to us about how that is important, and that's kind of part of your whole lifelong research, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this really gets to the topic of cancer disparities. We know that certain patient groups, whether it's patients in certain racial ethnic groups or whether patients who live in rural areas are far from a cancer center, certain groups of patients do not have the same access to the best cancer care, do not have the access to the latest clinical trials, and therefore may not have as good of results from cancer treatment. And this is really important to our cancer center. As an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center, not only are we pushing research, pushing clinical trials, but we also need to make sure that we are serving the patients in our region, which is Kansas and Western Missouri. And we want to be able to impact patients who may have less access. And there are a lot of efforts with Dr. Jensen's leadership, a lot of efforts for us to try to do that, where we just recently launched a campaign to increase clinical trial awareness in certain patient populations. We do free screenings across the region, across Kansas, across Western Missouri, to get patients access to screening, because early detection is really important for the best chance for cure. And we continue on those efforts to really try to reduce the gap and reduce disparities in our region.
Yeah, it is a big deal, and the work you've done is really important and significant in that area. Now, Cheryl, you're one of the many patients and survivors who play a vital role in our cancer research. You are part of a unique group called Patient and Investigator Voices Organizing Together, Pivot. That's pretty cool. It is a patient research advocacy initiative at the University of Kansas Cancer Center. Pivot provides cancer survivors, co-survivors, and researchers the opportunity to work together to design research that may lead to improved treatments and therapies. It is one of the few cancer center patient research advocacy programs in the country. That's really unique. How did that come about? Talk to us about it.
Well, through a lot of work, patience, and perseverance, that's for sure. It's kind of started out with a couple of us, one from the research side and then me from the patient side. Both of us, unbeknownst to the other, had been working to try to get something like Pivot, where patients could bring their voices, their experience and insights and wisdom into the research decision-making process. And then when we finally had the right time and the right opportunity to do it, we presented it to Dr. Jensen, and he said, heck yes. And we were on, and we grew from there. We started out with a patient development team that helped us put the meat and bones on what Pivot is, what the goals were, the membership was like, and that sort of thing, and what we would be doing. And then that transformed into the patient leadership team. This was all launched in 2016, and we have grown since then to be over 150 members. These are survivors and co-survivors of cancer who can contribute their wisdom and insight gained only from living with cancer 24/7 into the research decision-making process. So it's really an inspiring and opportunity for us, and it often turns out to be an inspiring opportunity for researchers too. And we have that because Roy Jensen and his leadership team put their money where their mouth is and actually help fund and get Pivot started and help us keep going and growing. So I want to thank them for being so supportive of this whole effort and always being there when we need their support.
All right, so we're going to pivot from this. I want to talk to Dr. Jensen and Dr. Jensen both about this. This feels really novel to me, and I didn't even know about it. This is cool. So talk to us a little bit about this relationship and how it got started.
So Pivot really is an organization that kind of grew organically from a combination of patients, survivors, and researchers who felt like it was critically important to empower patients to have a voice in directing the research program at the KU Cancer Center. And what's been great about this is it was a great example of where we kind of skated to where we felt the puck should be and was going to be among other NCI designated cancer centers. And sure enough, with the creation of the community outreach and engagement component for our grant, I think Pivot fit right into that, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that the recruitment of Dr. Chen was really incredible to jumpstart this initiative, and he came to us almost 3 years ago now.
As Cheryl was talking, you were shaking your head, yes, 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 yes. So come on, Ron, let's give us Give
Well,
some insight.
I mean, it's great to be an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center, but really what that means is we do a lot of really cool things here at KU, and Pivot is one of them. I think as a physician who treats patients, a lot of my patients at the end of treatment are asking, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And one of the ways patients can help is by helping collaborate with the researchers and really drive some of the research that we do. I think this collaboration between cancer research and community members and patient advocates is so important, because a lot of times when we do research, whether it's on the bench, in the laboratory, or in clinical trials, we need the patient's voice to tell us, well, that's important to me, that's important to the patient community, so then we can focus our research to do something that really will be impactful to the patients, because ultimately that's the goal for cancer research. And the fact that we have 150 Pivot members who are trained to help our researchers, this is probably the largest program of such in the country. And this is one way we lead cancer centers in this country. And other cancer centers are learning from us on how to do this. This is really very, very cool.
It is a very big, cool deal. Speaking of very big, cool, bold visions, this cancer building you're talking about. So tell us a little bit about what that vision looks like, Roy Jensen.
So,
and remember, we have to pay for it still.
yes, yeah, and I'll be expecting a check at the end of this program.
Okay, here we go.
But cancer centers are all about bringing investigators, clinicians together to collaborate. And one of the aspects of our current cancer program is that we're scattered across many different facilities. And the vision has always been to try to bring us together in a single facility that would enable us to collaborate across many different disciplines. And so trying to envision what that's going to look like, trying to figure out how we can pay for that building with the many challenges our economy is undergoing right now is not an easy problem, but we have seen a lot of support for this initiative in the community, and I just got off a call 20 minutes ago with a group that's trying to figure all this out. So I think we're making good progress, and this spring we're going to be able to roll out what that vision's really going to look like, and hopefully move forward and maybe.
Well, I've gotten to a few of those meetings, and I'm really excited because, Ron Chen, what would it mean to have research and clinical and patient folks all in the same space? Because I think that's the hallmark of this building. It's pretty cool.
I think it's huge, and I think it's really one of the next steps that we'll take as a cancer center to take the next level. I think having a lot of us together, researchers, clinicians, whether it's medical oncology, radiation oncology, surgeons, be together also will lead to just a lot of natural conversations and collaborations. Right now we're in different buildings, different facilities, and we have to schedule meetings, but if we're all together, it will naturally collaborate, and a lot more ideas, a lot more clinical trials will happen. Before I came to KU, I worked in North Carolina, UNC, for 10 years, and saw how a building like that, bring people together, can really foster collaboration, and I'm really looking forward to that here at KU.
Yeah, and I bet the Pivot members will be happy to be in that building with you sometimes, so that you guys can all be talking together. So, all right, Dr. Chen, the Proton Therapy Center is open and is treating patients. How's it going?
Well, so we started treating our first patient in our proton program at the end of May. So it's been 6-7 months since we've been going. It's going incredibly well. Really, I think what has been shown in our 6-7 month experience is that this is really a needed treatment option for patients in this area. Patients came, we treat a lot of patients every day. We also are able to offer clinical trials to these patients. It's really an incredible opportunity that we have for patients here to be able to access this latest technology without having to travel to out of state, several hundred miles away to get this treatment.
And that's a big deal to be able to get that done. In fact, I think you guys are so successful right now. You're starting to talk about the next one of these things, right? Isn't that right? You want another vault?
We we would love to have a second one to be able to take care of even more patients here. Absolutely.
That's a big deal. And we know that it really benefits patients in the region who no longer have to travel a long distance for the therapy. And that can help further research. Talk to us about that link.
Well, it's, when we have the latest technology, we also want to use that to offer patients clinical trial opportunities, because we're always pushing the latest treatment to be even better. And so actually, now that we have a proton facility in this region, the first one in this region, we're able to offer many patients access to clinical trials that use proton therapy that they couldn't access before. And I'll just give an example of how this could be done. So recently there was a trial that was done at Sloan Kettering, New York, actually using proton therapy to treat patients with end-stage metastatic cancer. And they were able to show in this randomized trial that proton therapy treating end-stage metastatic cancer can actually extend patients' life expectancy, almost double, by several months at the end of life. And so we're always using new technology, pushing clinical trials, finding new ways to use it to benefit patients, and that was just the latest example.
And I just say, people say, well, it's only several months, but the reality is several months begat several months begat several months, because there's all these things. Pretty soon, you've got several years or even several decades on and that is just a really, really big deal. Dr. Jensen, why should patients care about NCI Comprehensive Cancer Center? I mean, we've kind of eaten around that a little bit, nibbled around the edge a little bit, but talk to us, hit that head on.
Yeah. Well, NCI comprehensive status essentially means that you're among the best of the best. And it's critically important for patients being treated with cancer because, frankly, we don't have all the answers for our patients. And as Dr. Chin has already alluded to, we do a lot of clinical research trying to do better than what we are right now. And for many of our patients, being on a clinical trial is the best option for them in terms of being able to offer the latest treatments and hopefully something that's even better than standard of care. But obviously that's what we're trying to prove. But the bottom line is that there have been a number of studies, maybe close to a dozen now, which have shown that patients treated at an NCI-designated comprehensive cancer center have better outcomes than when they're treated elsewhere. And if you look at all comers, it may be as much as 25%, but that varies depending on what type of cancer. And so, and the reason for that, frankly, is the level of expertise that we can bring to each patient, the specific disease focus. Our breast cancer docs, they pretty much only treat breast cancer. They don't have to worry about leukemia or colon cancer or keeping up in some other clinical area. They are at the cutting edge of taking care of a very specific type of patient, and that makes a difference. And we see that play out in outcomes.
Yeah, that is such an important thing. Okay, now Cheryl, this mission, you're the lead pivot research advocate. It's deeply personal to you as well as sort of a calling. Talk to us a little bit about that, the personal side of this. What makes you so passionate about it? You may be muted, Cheryl.
I'm sorry. First of all, nothing really improves without research. Research is the baseline for improving treatments and diagnostics to help us feel, function, and survive better. And to me, what being a comprehensive cancer center means also, I wanted to touch on that. I have a hand up. But being a comprehensive cancer center means that we are among the best in research. And how that played out for my husband was that every time his current treatment for a prostate cancer didn't work, he was able to get a new treatment that wasn't yet in the clinic because it was being investigated. It was still being studied, and so it hadn't been approved to actually go into the clinic. And for the longest time, we were able to find treatments that actually worked for a while, until finally we didn't. But if he had not been at a cancer center, an NCI cancer center, where they're focused on research not only on an individual level for patients, but also on a community and broader level for our whole bi-state area. We wouldn't have had that access and that knowledge to be able to do that. So it really does mean a lot. And then you were asking me about Pivot. I'm sorry,
you're
but I
aren't you the
wanted
lead
to follow.
advocate for Pivot? Isn't that part of the story?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I am, which means that I chair the meetings and help in the background, in the, behind the scenes effort to lead and organize the Pivot patient investigator voices organized together, help organize the meetings and what we do and how we do it, and meet on a weekly basis to strategize with that. Then we also are working with our patient leadership team and our various committees.
That is such a great calling for you, and it sounds like it's personal because of the journey you had with your husband, but it's also a journey you've had for yourself.
Yes, I am a patient. I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I was a co-survivor with my husband who had tonsil cancer and prostate cancer. And again, to me, research is what is going to make the difference in how we have more treatments available that could be more effective, less side effects, and have a greater ability to feel, function, and survive than we would without research. I can only imagine that back in the early part of it was probably as early as the 70s, women going through breast cancer would have to have a mastectomy, where parts, not only the breast was taken, but parts of the muscle, and it could be even more. And now we have so many other options for breast cancer patients because of research, and that's continuing to improve, where it's less invasive and more effective, and that's key. And I've always been interested in research, so when I started getting involved as a research advocate nationally, I really thought we needed to have more patient voices, survivors and co-survivors, working with researchers here at KU. I shouldn't be the only one, and so that's what made me passionate about starting research, because I think both patients and researchers benefit from being involved and working together on research.
I totally bless that. And you're right, it's moved us from, Ron, from kind of this very deadly disease, and it can still be deadly, to sometimes a chronic disease. Talk to us about that journey.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. The cancer treatment advances, it's occurring every year. Every year there's big news coming out about another positive clinical trial where a new agent is either helping us cure disease or extending survival. And for patients who are treated at an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center, you will have the standard treatment options that are currently approved, but also, for patients where that doesn't work, you will have clinical trial options where we're testing on the national level the latest treatments, and I think that just offers patients hope. We can cure more patients, and the ones that maybe we're not able to cure, we now have more and more options to extend survival and also improve quality of life for patients, and I think that's really important.
So, Dr. Jensen, we've talked a lot about the research, the impact of this. Talk to us about how it affects our ability to recruit some of the finest people in the country.
I don't think I fully appreciated the impact that it would have in this particular area, and as the result of the growth of our research and clinical programs, we're always in a recruiting mode. And what I've been surprised by is the number of folks that have come through my office and just made a flat-out statement to say that they would not be there unless we were an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center. And I thought it might make a difference, but the number of people who have made that comment is really kind of surprised me. And it essentially means that we have access to the best of the best, because that's where those folks want to be. They want to be at an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center because I think for many clinicians, many researchers, it's almost like a good housekeeping seal of approval and an assurance to them that they're coming to a place that has the resources, that has the depth and breadth of their program and the quality of people there, that they can build their careers, and that's incredibly important.
It is important. All right, we're going to switch gears for a minute and turn to our medical director for infection prevention and control, Dr. Dana Hawkinson. Hawkeye.
Yeah.
Something wicked this way comes, it feels like, when we keep thinking about all these different viral processes, be it flu, RSV, and COVID. And I'm done. I'm back out of isolation now, feeling much better.
That's
but the numbers, talk to us about the numbers. They're not so good.
Yeah, they're not so good. Unfortunately, our COVID count has gone up in the last week. So right now, 56 total is that top line. Of that total, 35 are active, with 4 in the ICU still and 1 on the ventilator. I think really, the significant or severe illness with those people having to be in the ICU is really important. Luckily, we have probably seen nationally and in the Midwest a decline in the RSV cases as well as hospitalizations, according to the latest CDC data. But we know influenza, unfortunately, is still up there, and hoping that the velocity of that surge is decreasing. And you can see here, these are our influenza positive tests here at the health system, and you can see that over the last 2 weeks there's a slight decrease in the overall positive tests. So I think that is good news. And then moving on to admissions, this is even more important. We have a slight decrease in the overall admissions, but as you can see in that orange bar, as opposed to the blue, the orange is adults, the blue is our pediatric patients as well. So overall, still, Steve, like we've talked about, more significant number of hospitalizations for influenza itself than we have seen previously, probably in most of our careers. So I think that's
been over a decade since it's been like that. And if we look, do you have the heat map, guys, that you can pull up? Because the numbers across the country over the 2 weeks, the hospitalizations are up 47%, number of COVID cases, and this is what not even a real count anymore because of all the at-home testing. But the test positivity rate's up to about 19%, and the numbers of cases across the United States and you can see it on the map. If you think about a map like a month ago, how different this map looks today. So clearly a rise. We heard Dr. Greg Poland talk a little bit about the XBB variant yesterday, et cetera.
Yeah.
What do you fear the most right now?
I fear those people that are at highest risk of hospitalization, who are not, number one, up to date with their boosters, number two, not getting tested early so they can get on that outpatient therapy, particularly with Paxlovid. The alternative therapy is molnupiravir, as you have talked about. Paxlovid sometimes has significant interactions with other medications, so it's important to be prescribed that in consultation with your healthcare provider. But my biggest concern is then at some point, does the virus change? Does that spike protein change enough where we don't have that significant part of our immune system, that T-cell immunity, that really helps protect us against hospitalization and severe disease? Right now, that does not seem to be the case. We still have very good protection from the vaccines, even those initial monovalent vaccines. But right now, if you are not up to date with your booster and you are due for it, please go get that, and that will offer you the greatest protection.
Yeah, that is so true. I saw a graph this morning or last night, I think, actually, that was talking about the percentage of patients over the age of 5 who have had the bivalent booster. Yeah. And the number is like 16% across the country. Yeah. That is not high enough, and that's going to set us up for a real challenge in healthcare delivery as these numbers rise, if that continues to go across the country.
Yep, and right now what we've seen really through all the variants is they really cause the same amount of severe disease, or have that highest risk of severe disease, save for Delta, which now there's a couple new recent publications that show that the Omicron, initial Omicron variant and the subvariants do not cause or do not have the higher risk of severe disease as Delta did, but we know Delta was a little bit higher than any other variant as well. So hopefully that's good. We still need to be watching out for other genes or gene products or changes in the genome of SARS-CoV-2 that will allow it to be more virulent or cause more severe disease. At this point in time, it does not seem to be doing that. So I think overall that is good for everybody.
And Dr. Poland mentioned the XBB variant, whether that was going to be a challenge to us. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, at this point it doesn't seem to. We continue to hear immune evasion, and we really are focused on antibodies and immune evasion with that spike protein and antibodies directed towards that, but we still have our T cell part of that immune system. And so really when you have that immune evasion with the antibodies, you're going to have those higher chances of being infected and that initial infection. But hopefully if you have been vaccinated and the combination of vaccination and infection, you're going to have built up that immune response to the other parts of the virus as well. So I think that is the big issue, and we have seen this ever since the variants have been identified, Steve, is that oh, this one is more immune evasive than the other one. This one continues to be immune evasive. And, but we also know we have good publications, especially in the New England Journal of Medicine, showing that people who have been vaccinated or vaccinated and infected do create those broad neutralizing antibodies to those variants that we have identified now, and more than likely variants that we haven't even identified at this point.
Yeah, it'll be a wild ride, but I think the winter will be a challenge to us, and it's going to get really cold in Kansas City next week, so we know people are going to be inside. But fortunately, Cheryl and I have on our red sweaters, so we are protected from bad things, and we're going to look really good. But Jess, I don't know where your red is. Somehow we missed that moment. I know Hawkeye has to go jump on a plane today. So good luck. Have a great. Am I going to see you before Christmas?
I'll be back. I'll be back Monday.
Well, all right.
But I will be wearing my mask in the airport and in the plane. So I think it's a good exercise in ways to stay healthy and try to prevent yourself from getting infected, not only with SARS-CoV-2, but those other viruses, RSV, influenza, and those other common cough and cold viruses, which I think we all know somebody who probably has that at this point in time, and it's knocking people down as well. So.
You know, Hawkeye, I think, and I feel very lucky to have had a pretty mild case of COVID last week, and much better today. A little tired more than anything, as well as the cough, a little bit of congestion, but man, all that's getting better. I don't want it again, and I will stay up, and I've stayed up to date on my vaccinations, and I think that's part of why I was able to sail through it pretty much unscathed. So.
Yes, and we are glad to have you back.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be here causing trouble, especially for the good Jessica level. Jessica, talk to us. How are things going this morning?
I loving your getup.
I know. You know, it's pretty fashionable, right? I 1999 from Amazon. I got that on a speed delivery, and I did it just for you. Here we go.
Looks good. I love a man in a vest. You can pull it off well.
Yeah.
Okay. Question for Dr. Chen and Dr. Jensen from Gene. It's a good question because he says with today's modern electronic communication technology, why is it so important for everyone to be in the same building and communicate together? Explain that.
I think that's a really good question. It's great that we now have very easy access to Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, but I don't think that these sort of virtual meetings can replace just getting together naturally. So for example, I was thinking about this recently. We were doing residency interviews, and there were 16 residents in a room. You know, if we did that in person, there would naturally be one-on-one, two-on-one conversations in small groups. But when you have 16 people together on a Zoom meeting, it's really hard to break off naturally and have sort of natural conversations. So the ability to see people, to converse and naturally stimulate ideas for research and collaboration, I think that's something that will never be able to be replaced by these online meetings.
Sydney wants to. Dr. Jensen?
I had some too, yeah?
No, I totally agree with that. And you know, you can engineer collaborations by having set meetings, but it doesn't replace spontaneity and creativity. As I think most people understand, is all about spontaneity. And an idea pops in your head, and you're sitting next to somebody, and you start bouncing it off, and that's where the magic happens. You can kind of get there somewhat by having set meetings, but it's not the same.
And I'll just say, I think that's true in so many different worlds. If you think about even here in the executive office, it's that time at night when things settle down a little bit and we're all in the same space, that's when so much work gets done. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I am so excited about this possibility because it's true everywhere you go. Creativity is creativity, and research at its heart is creativity.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cheryl.
Okay, she's got her hand up. She's very disciplined.
She is.
She is. I'm just mouthy, Cheryl. I'm just mouthy. Go ahead.
I can vouch for how this happens firsthand. And this was before COVID, when I had traveled to Dallas for a Komen meeting that was researchers and advocates. And coming home, there was a handful of me and 2 researchers that were from different institutions. But we were sitting at the table and this brainstorming started happening. So you don't have the when you're on Zoom, you don't have the informal conversations that create a possible work together on a different way, or seeing a project in a different light than you do when you're on a Zoom. And also on a Zoom, how many of you have, now be honest with me, have been on a Zoom and you're not really paying as good attention as if you were sitting in that meeting? There's your email over here and there's this. So it doesn't get quite the same attention when people are on Zoom, and you don't have the informal running into people and having the synergy that happens when you get together informally. And they say when you're in the shower, you have the best ideas. Well, when you're walking around or walking through the office or running into somebody, you can come up with some informal, hey, we need to talk about this. Now that I see you, and they don't say that on Zoom because you don't really see the person on Zoom. You see their likeness, but you're not with them. So I can tell you that it does make a difference in, the collaboration and the everyday teamwork that would happen if you are together in a space versus remotely.
Yeah, so true. Jess.
Cindy wants to know, what are some of the cancer treatments and drugs that have been created at the University of Kansas Cancer Center?
Sure.
Jensen.
Great question. And we actually had 5 KU created drugs that we were able to talk about at our site visit this past year. And I'll give just one example, and that's phoscyclopirox, which in that project is being led by John Taylor, Scott Weir, and Sri Anant, and that's one of the first bladder cancer specific treatments that has been developed in well over 20 years, and that is now in clinical trials. It's being funded by an NCI SBIR grant, and they're moving that along, and we'll soon be opening additional clinical trials for that agent. But it's a great example of how, collaboration across a clinician, a translational researcher, and a basic science researcher, that's what it took in the skill set, the collective skill set that those folks brought to the table to make that happen.
Sarah wants to know, how many patients does KU Cancer Center treat each year?
So there's a number of ways to answer that question. In terms of new patients that we see here at the 39th and Rainbow campus, it's around 6,500 new cancer patients. If you look at all of the unique patients that walk through our doors, so this includes not only the new patients, but the follow-ups, the screening opportunities, and all of that together, that's around 50,000 unique individuals each and every year.
50,000, that's a big number, and I think that's probably the more representative number. And you think of all the things people have, and that's a lot of visits, because that's a unique patient, but those patients make lots of visits to the cancer center.
Dr. Stites, I've just got a couple of good questions left, and I want to sneak in here. But do we know? Sam wants to know: do we know the impact that having comprehensive designation status here in our area? Do we know what that effect that it has on the metro's economy?
We do, actually.
Sure.
We think.
Yeah. So we have been tracking this number since 2007, when the state of Kansas put a line item in their budget to help support our cancer center. And roughly about $2.5 to $3 billion of economic activity has been generated just on the research side. We don't track the clinical side for a whole bunch of reasons that I'm not going to get into, but that basically means that we're able to go out successfully get federal grants and other types of grants, bring them to this region and support the activities of our researchers, their teams, and all of the folks that it takes to support them. So it's a pretty significant impact over that time.
I have a couple of COVID questions, Dr. Stites, I want to ask you really quick after this last one. It's Travis's question, and I really like this question. And he wants to know, why does research cost so much?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think we could probably have a good answer from our team here, but part of it is there's just a lot of money that has to go into new drug development and new drug testing, Ron.
Well, I will start, and I'm sure Dr. Jensen has a response to this question too. I want to clarify that research does cost a lot. It takes a lot to go from a very promising drug or a promising treatment, using it on cells in the laboratory, to then testing on animals, to then all the clinical trials we need to do that to prove that it works, to then make it to FDA approval to help patients. And many drugs along the pathway end up not working and don't make it all the way through. So that's a lot of money. But I also want to clarify that research costs so much, and we really work very hard to prevent this cost from reaching the patient. So oftentimes when I'm talking to a patient about a clinical trial, this is really a good option for you, this is the latest option there. The patient's wondering, well, is this going to cost me personally to participate? And really the answer should be no. If there's a new drug that's not FDA approved, that should be provided by the trial and not really the patient have to pay for that. If there's sort of new tests that have to be done, the trial should pay for that. And so research really is expensive for all the laboratory equipment and all the people that are hired to carry out this work. But really for the patient participating on a clinical trial, that really should not be more expensive for them.
I think that's really well said. I think you handled that question great. What do you think?
Yeah, if you look at a typical grant that we get from the NIH, they provide us somewhere in the range of $300,000 to $400,000 per year per grant to do the research, and and that money goes to pay for the principal investigator who kind of directs the research. It goes to pay for the technicians and the graduate students and postdocs that carry out the research. And of course, it goes to pay for the highly specialized equipment that folks need to do the research, and the reagents and consumables that's necessary to do cell culture, run Western blots, do DNA sequencing, all of that kind of thing. So, it's research is expensive. But not knowing and not having an answer is even more expensive.
Yeah, now what I would just say too, and we can ask Cheryl, because Cheryl, I bet you help reassure patients that they're not going to pay to be in research. Patients don't pay to be in research.
They shouldn't be, so at KU they aren't, but you shouldn't have to pay to be in research. You might have more visits to the doctor on occasion, but overall, like the drug, as Roy has just explained, the drug is provided free by the usually by the manufacturer or NCI in some cases. So you don't have to pay for it for being in research. That should never happen. You will have to pay for anything that's like standard of care, and that's usually paid by your insurance. But of course, with insurance, you have deductibles and co-insurance. But one of the things that hasn't been mentioned here is there is a whole lot of internal and external oversight in research to make sure that what we're really proving is what we say we're proving, and that we have done the research correctly and have done all the things necessary. And then when it comes to clinical trials, we have review boards that look at the protocol and this is basically the plan of action that the team needs to follow for each participant, and it has to be very precise. And they also look at the informed consent, and this is one thing, if you go and research, you get an informed consent that should be telling you everything you need to know in terms of what to expect, what not to expect, the potential cost, the potential benefit, if there is one. I mean, you hope that the research will be successful, but you don't know. That's why we call it research. If we knew the answer and knew it would be good, then we could just call it a day and not have to do research. But we have to find out if what we think and what the evidence shows so far is actually going to work. And that's costly. And the oversight is costly, but it would be more costly if it wasn't done correctly and patients had to endure something that was not really supported by evidence. So they also
I'm going to be boastful for just just a moment and say that one of the keys about U.S. clinical research is that we study and look so hard for patient side effects and bad outcomes, not just the good side, and we're not driven by pharma. And as a result, research itself is not profitable. Like, we have to pay extra money. Research costs us money to do. It's not something it's not some big profit center for a health system or an academic medical center. But I think the point of that is we are very selective and we work really hard to make sure that our patients are getting the right things, that the trials are good trials, and that the patients are not having bad side effects. And there's a ton. We can't even begin to talk to you about how much monitoring goes into these things.
Well, and the one thing you mentioned, side effects. Something that's happened as a result of advocates, patient survivors and co-survivors being involved in research is a greater emphasis on patient-reported outcomes, because oftentimes before it was what the doctors perceived were the side effects. And as you all probably know, people go into the office and they don't always share the details of what's going on. So then now there's a process and a lot of research to actually get the patient's perspective and opinion about what's going on. And that didn't always happen. So side effects weren't always reported as robustly as they should have been because they didn't ask the patient what they felt. And they're the ones that are having to go through it, not the doctor.
Yeah. Jess.
All right, two quickie questions for you since Doc Hawk is gone on COVID. Joellen wants to know, any idea when the second bivalent booster might be coming or recommended?
Yeah, no, so the CDC said after the first one, if you have the first one, that it's probably, they may wait a year for the next booster. But I think that's a little unclear. I suspect we're going to find some patient categories that will end up being recommended after 6 months. And I think those would be especially older, more immunocompromised patients. I would not be surprised to see a 6-month recommendation. We'll have to wait and see a little bit more. B, whether or not we have to pivot the vaccination again if XBB or one of the derivatives becomes more prominent. And so I think there's some loose questions out there. But right now, it's going to, the last time the CDC really talked about it was looking at an annual booster. I wouldn't be surprised to see one after about 6 months. But that information's still to come.
All right, and then Angela wants to know, how long do I wait after having COVID to get my booster?
Yeah, that's been something we've talked about a few times, and I think it's meaning that it's a conversation we have ongoing, because with new boosters and new variants, you get a little nervous. But I'd say in general, it's probably 60 to 90 days after your episode of COVID, go and get a booster shot if you haven't already had one. So okay. I think that's probably the right recommendation. Wow, this has been one heck of a conversation. I think, Jess, we got to have these folks back. This is great, and they always do such a great job when they're with us. And very thankful, very deeply appreciative for all three of you for being here today. I want to get the final thoughts today. Cheryl Jernigan, final thoughts.
Well, first of all, I would say that if you're a patient, in other words, if you're a survivor or a co-survivor of cancer and you're interested in research, please consider getting involved in PIVOT, which is Patient and Investigator Voices organizing together. What we learn as someone who lives with cancer 24/7 are wisdom and insights that most people don't know unless they have actually gone through and had to live that disease. And we provide a perspective that has helped change research and make it better for patients and laser-like focused on patients. So if you're interested in about research and trying to make a difference to make sure that our research is laser focused on what patients want and need, then please consider getting involved with Pivot. And if you happen to be a researcher, please consider, if you're based with KU, please consider using one of the many resources that we have in Pivot for researchers to be able to get patient feedback or co-survivor feedback on the research questions or the research that you're thinking about. And if possible, actually get one or more patients working with you on your team. This is a team science, and it's really unfortunate that a lot of times we leave out a key member of that team, and that's the person that's being affected. And they usually have the greatest insights, not scientifically, but the greatest insights as to what this disease means, what is important to patient and what matters. So please, if you're a researcher, work with Pivot. If you're a survivor or co-survivor of cancer, please get involved in Pivot, especially if you're interested in research.
Big deal. All right. Dr. Jensen, congratulations again on Comprehensive.
Thank you. And I want to express my thanks to Cheryl and all the other folks with Pivot for being our partners in building our research program and making sure that it's relevant to their needs, and that's critically important. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't thank really everyone throughout this region and community in terms of helping us achieve NCI comprehensive status. It really was a regional and community effort. The Stowers Institute was part of this. The Children's Mercy was part of this. The Lawrence campus was part of this. It required many people coming together and working as a team to make this happen. And that's where the progress is made, and we're very proud of all the support that we've received across this community.
Yeah, approximately a very big deal to all of us, and never feels more personal until you're a cancer patient, and then you realize just how blessed you are to have these great folks here. Dr. Chen.
Well, I want to, a couple of things. One, I want to add to what Cheryl was saying. We have an incredible Pivot group. Patients can really get involved and contribute. And I know we have a broad viewership here. You don't have to live around Kansas City. You can live around Wichita. You can live in western Kansas, southeastern Kansas. We have Pivot members throughout the region, and we want you to be involved. And so that's one thing I want to make sure that people understand. The other thing is we have an incredible cancer center here in Kansas City that's serving this region. And it's just really hard to sort of describe all of that in words, but this is an incredible cancer center, one of the top in the country. And so for patients who have a diagnosis of cancer, this is really a great place to go. And you can stay at home and get the latest treatment and latest clinical trials. This is a great service to our community.
You know, I've been trying to figure out today how to put into words what it means. And since I'm a football geek, I'm going to take a swing at this. It's like sitting here with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and knowing that Cheryl Jernigan represents the 80,000 people there in the stands, driving us on to greatness, and maybe a little bit of having a little of the Hunt family in there too, just from the standpoint of, I think our patients help own this entire operation and help support us with their voice as well. So it is such an important deal. But ultimately, it's a team sport. And having Comprehensive Cancer Center and having people like this at the table is like having Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes right there watching football every Sunday. It is really special. This is a special time, Jess, to be at KU.
Oh, that was a good one, Dr. Stites. I like that comparison. All right, well, we want to thank all of you for being with us today and all of our guests for joining us. Of course, we'll be back here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock with another morning medical update. And as we leave with you, we want to share some of the best moments from our big NCI announcement that we shared with you last July. Everyone, have a great day.
The University of Kansas Cancer Center has received National Cancer Institute's comprehensive designation. Congratulations.
This day was decades in the making.
Comprehensive designation is not just a landmark achievement for our institution. I think it's actually a pivotal moment for everyone living in this region.
We are joining 52 institutions across the country.
Comprehensive designation opens the door to more funding, more clinical trials, more research, more expertise. And I think our success is a reflection of the extraordinary amount of hard work and the talent of our team that we assembled, the unwavering commitment of our institutional leadership, and the steadfast support of our community.
The real value of this is finding the treatment that prolongs life and gives people hope.
Ultimately, our real goal is to eliminate this terrible disease from the face of the earth. I am so proud of everyone who works in our center. I am one of the luckiest people in the world because these folks are really good.
Coming up tomorrow on the Morning Medical Update, about 1% of women under 40 experience early menopause. But did you know that for some women, early menopause can lead to heart complications? As if we don't have enough to worry about. I'm Jessica Lovell on the next Morning Medical Update. Meet a woman who's gone through it firsthand and her cardiologist who explains the heart connection and the top signs that signal trouble is ahead. That's Thursday at 8.
I'm Alexis Del Cid. Next, All Things Heart.
Dr. Poli early on described me as a stroke waiting to happen.
When her situation looked dire, what this Kansas City woman did and how her doctors helped her to keep her from becoming a stroke statistic. Thursday morning at 10.
We want to let you know that starting next week, we will be taking a couple of weeks off from our program so that we can spend some time with our families.
The good news is you'll still be able to watch our Morning Medical Update every weekday and All Things Heart on Thursdays.
That's right. We have chosen some of our very favorite episodes from the last year as encores, and we've recorded some pretty fun introductions to help remind you what each of those episodes is about. Wait until you see how many ugly Christmas sweaters Dr. Stites and Dr. Hawkinson own. Very interesting.
I can't wait. And then we return with live programming on Wednesday, January 4th. Until then, happy holidays.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.